Welcome to this edition of Hi-Fi Plus and our audio reviews. I've got an exciting product today that I think is different enough to be really intriguing, and specifically a product that asks the question, is this the best sound bar you can buy? So let's get into it. Today we're reviewing the Devialet Dione. You can see the Dione in the background here. It's sitting on my cabinet with my television, and it's a pretty interesting product. If you know Devialet, you know that they're a high-end audio manufacturer, most famous for advanced Class D amplification, but also of note because they're the manufacturer of very high output, very high power individual speakers that can be placed around the home in various arrays. But they're the Phantom is the name of that product, and it's quite different from other streaming type speakers that you might see or that you might listen to. Anyway, Devialet, being experts in digital processing and digital amplification, have seen fit to put together a soundbar and try to solve some of the problems that people have had building a system for a relatively small room, condominium or apartment type situation, living room in a home where you want one system that can kind of do it all without the hassles of wiring and connections and complex electronics. So what the Dione does is it gives you 17 speakers in one box. Yes, you heard me right. 17 speakers in one box with 950 watts of amplification. So while it might look small, when you take it out of the box, the first thing you notice is this thing is heavy and solid. And of course, you can't have high quality drivers without big magnets, and you can't have lots of high power amplification without power supplies and all of the other stuff. How they shrunk it down to this size, I don't really know. But in any event, what they're trying to do with the 17 speakers is just as interesting as the raw count, because we know from automotive audio that you can have a lot of speakers and you can have sound like garbage. So, quantity and quality are, they're both keywords, but they're not the same thing. Okay, so how does the Dione attempt to deliver very high quality? One thing is through, as I mentioned before, the use of high quality drivers. Of the 17 drivers, 8 of them are assigned to the low frequency range. If you remember anything about your physics class, you're not going to move a lot of air in the bass frequencies with small speakers. Because of the cabinet size, Devialet needs to give you a relatively small set of speakers, but they use 8 of them, and essentially I would say they're attempting to duplicate what you could do with a very high quality 8-inch subwoofer. We'll come in a minute to whether that works or not, but that's essentially what they're trying to do, and they're not trying to defy the laws of physics. However, they have a trick up their sleeves, which is Devialet pioneered the idea of integrating the amplifier with speakers with knowledge of the dynamic limits of the speaker, so that they could, in real time, roll off the amount of power that they were sending to the speaker right at the edge of what the speaker could do. That means, unlike other systems you're likely to see, the Dione is capable of putting out a high level of bass without damaging itself and without a high level of distortion, which you often get when you overdrive a speaker. So it's a very nifty way to put out very solid low frequencies, but not exceed the capabilities of what in the end is not the biggest bass driver you're going to see. But that said, so that's how they get good bass out of this thing, and that's nifty. The other thing they do, though, is they try to have the other 9 speakers set up in an array so that they can duplicate the spatial effects that you want, especially on movies, that come from having, in a traditional setup, left, right, center, and rear channels, as well as height channels for Dolby Atmos. So they use the 9 mid-range tweeter drivers to be able to reproduce all of those dimensions, along with sophisticated digital signal processing to allow a front speaker to simulate the depth effects that you would get with a rear channel speaker setup. So that's complicated technological explanation for a pretty simple idea, which is you can have one box with one connection plus power, but one connection, and from that you can get the impact of a receiver, a left, a right, a center channel, a left and a right rear channel, and a subwoofer. Plus, you skip all of the complicated wiring that you would have to traipse around the room, or you might never bother to do, and so you wouldn't have the actual spatial effects that you paid for. I think it's a killer idea. I think it's really fits with what a lot of people that we've talked to in the marketplace would like, which is a simple system that's easy to place in the room, that's easy to move if you go to a different house or a different condominium or a different apartment. Doesn't require you to cut holes in the walls, which in some rental situations is definitely frowned upon, really not probably allowed by your lease. So you can have high quality while at the same time having ease of integration with your living environment. It's what people want. Devialet has built it. The question that this leaves is, does it work? And I'm going to say the answer to that is yes. I want to come back at the end of this and talk more about the value equation, but this thing is pretty darn impressive when you get down to sound quality questions. I was especially impressed with the depth and the power that it can deliver in the bass. I suspect if you were listening to house music or hip hop and you were trying to have a dance party, this would not do the job. I don't think it probably has enough output at very low frequencies to work for that kind of application. But if you're listening to movies and you're in a small or medium-sized room, I'm actually in a fairly large room here, 25 by 18 kind of room, and the bass output was very satisfying on both soundtracks and on music. I used some of my low-frequency test discs, music test discs, and really thought the bass definition was good, and the power level and the balance in the bass was what you would want for an accurate reproduction of music and a satisfying sense of it's got a good beat and you can dance to it. When we move up to the mid-range, I would characterize the Dione as having a not overpowering presence region. You might say that it's a little bit soft or dark in the mid-range. I think a lot of people are going to enjoy that. A lot of people are going to like that because it's not pushy. But on the other hand, it might not satisfy those of you who really want a super high level of clarity on vocals. With vocals in mind, by the way, there are 3 settings of the digital signal processing in the Dione. One is aimed at music reproduction, one is aimed at movies and the spatial effects from those signals, and one is aimed at voice, so that if you're listening to news, or in my case, I've been watching the Tour de France, you can hear the commentators very clearly, more so than you might on a lot of sound bars and component home theater systems. Anyway, the mid-range is slightly softer or depressed. That's something I think a lot of you would enjoy, actually. But for absolute accuracy hounds, it's maybe not what you're looking for. And then in the treble, I would say there is a slight rise for a sense of clarity and crispness to what's going on. And that I thought worked fine on music, but on movie soundtracks, it really comes alive and allows the sharp sounds of activity in the room to have a sense of realism that many of you would quite enjoy. Again, in absolute accuracy terms, it's not exactly what an audiophile would probably want. The errors I'm talking about are small. This is judged from the perspective of a reviewer who does audiophile equipment all day long. So take that as an important bit of context for my comments, but that's essentially what you're going to hear. Another thing I like about the Dione is I think my comments are likely to be reflected in many rooms, because the Dione comes with an automated adjustment system to test your room and to tune the sound processing of the Dione to your room environment. How heavily weighted are the drapes and the carpeting and the furniture? Do you have a really live environment with a lot of wood and hard surfaces? Or do you have a lot of heavy furniture, and do you have thick rugs and lots of drapery materials? Depending on how the room is set up, the Dione will tune its output to fit with your room. That's something that's particularly important at the bass frequencies, and I think that's probably why I enjoyed the bass of the Dione more than I have with just about any other integrated product of this type. So if you're getting the impression that I was impressed with the Dione, you're right. Now let's come to the question of value, as I promised a moment ago. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and so is value. So we just have to say that because it's true, and you really have to think hard about it. The Dione is $2,500. You can get a soundbar for $150. If you have speakers built into your TV, so you can get a soundbar for effectively $0, assuming you're going to have a television to begin with. So for some of you, $2,500 is a big expenditure, and you're like, no soundbar can possibly be worth that. Okay, we can say that about just about anything. It's not possible for a Porsche 911 to be worth $120,000, and yet there they are, and Porsche is one of the most profitable car companies on earth, and they're all over the place, and people love them, and there's a waiting list. So it's possible for a car to be worth $120,000 as defined by people buy them. And I'll say, just as an aside, since I also get to review cars for this gig, the Porsche 911 is totally worth it because it will pass the show me better for less test, which is you really can't show me a better sports car for less money than a 911. Some people might debate that. There's taste in everything, but you get the idea. I think the Dione passes the show me better for less in that it's really hard to think of a soundbar that's better than this for less money. Are there other soundbars that are of similar performance at similar price points? Yes, I would say that's the case. I would certainly therefore put the Dione on my short list and make sure that it's somewhat movie oriented, maybe not quite as musically oriented. Angle is the one that fits with the kind of media that you listen to, but if you're a little bit more oriented in the movie direction, I think you will find that the Dione really does the job. There's one other way to take a look at the Dione in terms of value, and that is what would it cost for you to assemble a component system that sort of did what this did. And I would say you'd probably spend $500 on a receiver, and you'd spend $500 on a subwoofer, and you would spend $300 a piece on each of 5 speakers, left, right, center, left and right rear. So that's 5 speakers plus the sub that you would have, and that adds up to $2,500. And those are pretty basic speakers driven by a pretty basic receiver. So I think it stands up to the test of how does it compare with a component system, because it sounds similar or better to how that would sound. And it also is much easier to integrate with the room. So, with that, I liked it. I think you would enjoy it. I think it's a very good soundbar, and I think it fits a need in the market that has been addressed by others, but Devialet has gone really all out to try to produce something that's the equivalent of component products in an easy to integrate, easy to use package. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you come back for more of our equipment reviews on the Hi-Fi Plus YouTube channel. I would invite you to subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Thanks.